Hello and welcome to another episode of Queer Peer Reviews, where we review queer media good, bad, and ugly. I'm your host, Jamie, and on today's episode, I've put together a list of my top 5 canceled queer shows. I guess you could say more specifically these are all canceled sapphic shows, because let's be honest, those are really the only ones that studios have been canceling. But yeah, I'm not talking about shows like One Day at a Time and Love Victor, where their original networks canceled them and they were eventually picked up by a different studio. I'm talking about shows that after season 1 were abruptly canceled for numerous types of reasons, and unfortunately we did not receive closure to those stories. Alright, so starting off at number 5, the only reason why I'm putting this one at number 5 is because I unfortunately was unable to watch it for reasons I will be talking about in a few minutes, is Rise of the Pink Ladies, which was on Paramount+. Rise of the Pink Ladies premiered on April 6, 2023 with 10 episodes, and shortly after the last episode of the season premiered in June, it was announced that the Pink Ladies would not be returning and was immediately removed from Paramount+. The show moved to video on demand and DVD, so hence why I have not yet watched the show for myself. After I heard it was canceled, by the time I got access to a Paramount+ account, it was already gone. The studio claims that the reason why Rise of the Pink Ladies got immediately axed was because it was part of the merging between Paramount+ and Showtime, and this was a part of them refining their roster of programming. While I myself am unable to comment on how good the show was, because unfortunately, like I said, I was not able to watch it, I will in the future, just I haven't yet before this video comes out. I did hear a lot of great things about the show from online, and it was all over my TikTok, especially like a lot of the songs were all over my For You page for a bit. It was a show I was definitely looking forward to watching, and I definitely still will. There's definitely a lot more representation in all shapes and forms, more than just queer representation. Like a lot of the shows I'm going to be talking about in this video, I did see some petitions to save the Pink Ladies, but unfortunately that was something that just couldn't happen. Next up at number 4 is a show that we did review here in Queer Peer Reviews last year, which is First Kill. The Netflix original aired on June 10th, 2022 with 8 episodes, and unfortunately in August 2022, just 2 months later, it was axed. Netflix claimed that First Kill did not have the staying power of most Netflix hits. I will admit that, as if you've seen our review on the show or not, the writing was a little iffy. There were definitely some issues with the show itself, but it really did have a huge fan base. I know there was a lot of outrage with this one, and the worst of all, it left us on this huge cliffhanger, not only just with the story itself, but the relationship between the two main characters. I personally think the excuse of First Kill not having the staying power is an absolutely ridiculous excuse, because if you look at some of the shows that Netflix has been putting out recently and keeping consistent with, rather than a lot of shows they wound up canceling, it just doesn't make sense to me. It was still a great show to watch overall. I definitely would have looked forward to there being a season 2 and just having some sort of closure, but unfortunately that is something we will not be getting. Next up at number 3, we have Amazon Prime's A League of Their Own, which is an adaptation from the film from the 90s. Premiering on August 12th, 2022, we were given 8 episodes, and unfortunately a year later, in recent times, in August of 2023, it was scrapped due to the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes. For those of you who have seen the original League of Their Own film, it wasn't necessarily queer at all, but definitely something that could have been a lot of people's queer awakenings. You also have queer icon Rosie O'Donnell in the film. She also makes an appearance in the show. They even talk about like the secret gay speakeasies, like the Friend of Dorothy. There's a lot of historical things that go into the show itself, which is really cool. I just got done watching it. You also have queer people of color, you have a trans character, you have just, there's a lot of queer women in this, and I know before the show itself came out, like A League of Their Own was one of those films where it's like, there's no way not a single person on like those teams was not queer, because yeah, and the show definitely touches upon that. And while I love the film itself, the show definitely has a lot more to offer, I'd say, so definitely check it out. Next up at number 2, we have Everything Sucks, which is another Netflix original series that got canceled. The show aired on February 16th, 2018 and had 10 episodes, and no more than 2 months later, it was done. The series had a really young cast, including Sydney Sweeney, and the show was set in the 90s, and it revolved around this young girl who was coming to terms with her sexuality. It was a really, really cute show that I held near and dear to my heart. It was one of the first shows on Netflix that I watched not knowing going in that it was queer, and when I finally caught the queer vibes, I was very excited, and it was such a sweet show. While the show as a whole was decently successful, the studio claims that episode 1 did not have a high enough completion rate, which means while the episode itself was only 32 minutes long, there wasn't enough people finishing the entire episode as a whole. The studio was worried that they would not have a big enough audience for a season 2. Quite frankly, I don't understand that, because again, there are so many other shows that I don't think should be made anymore, and they even stated that as a whole the season was successful, but it was that first episode that ruined it for everybody. It wasn't a bad episode or anything. I don't know why people didn't finish it, but it was definitely worth going from episode 1 to the last episode and just seeing it all come together. I just think it was very unfortunate for a show like this to get canceled, because like I said, it was a very young cast, and unlike the other shows that I am talking about, these are, I believe they're either freshmen in high school or maybe even middle school, and I don't know, it was just really nice to see a bunch of young kids going through this experience together. And next up at number 1, we have I Am Not Okay With This, another Netflix original. Do better, Netflix. I think we're starting to see a pattern here. I Am Not Okay With This premiered on February 26, 2020 with 7 episodes, and unfortunately this was also the year that COVID happened, so in August of that same year, 2020, the show was axed. The studio claims that this was due to COVID-related circumstances and that the cost outweighed the value of the show itself. While on hiatus, a lot of studios pay their actors to make sure that they don't hop on any other projects in fear of losing them and not being able to film with them in future seasons. Unfortunately, the studio did not see the cost of this being worth filming another season, so they just decided to not pay the actors and completely cut the show itself. I really loved I Am Not Okay With This. Bruce and I filmed a review of it and I loved it so much. I thought it was a really great show, and even the studio thought so as well, because one of the writers even stated that they expected it to be almost as big as Stranger Things. They had lots of big visions for it, to the point of them wanting to have the budget be as big as Stranger Things, to have all these different things happening for season 2 and future seasons. I forget if it was the director or the writer, but once they heard that the show was getting cut by Netflix, they begged the studio to let them recut the season finale so it didn't leave us on as much of a cliffhanger as it did, but unfortunately Netflix shut that down. As a whole, it's really heartbreaking to hear such a great show got cut because of the pandemic. I think we can all agree that Netflix is the problem here. But yeah, so that was my top 5 canceled queer shows. I know that there are definitely a bunch of other ones out there, but unfortunately I haven't seen them all, so this is just my personal top 5. If you guys have any other suggestions to other shows we should talk about, definitely comment down below. And we also have links to our social media pages as well as the Trevor Project in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching.